That's a nice thing. From last time when I think there were two people managed to get on consistently last time when I was kind of struggling a little bit with the technology. So yeah, many thanks to Laura and Mel and the Centre for Research into Autism and Education, who are hosting this for me. So that's very nice of them because they didn't have to, and it's an evening, so people have places to go and people to see. Presumably, I mean, I don't, but I would imagine that most people do. Obviously, it's an odd, it's this kind of setup is me just sort of talking into a void. So I hope you're there, and I hope that you're not too bored. I'm going to be taking up your evening for the next hour and a bit, basically until I get too tired to continue, or until I get a headache, or until I simply run out of things to say. The last one is fairly unlikely because I can kind of go forever if I get into the right kind of frame of mind. But then that I mean, that's autism for you, isn't it, I suppose? So yeah, if I waffle a lot, it's because I'm basically just talking to myself. Okay, so it's that's the way it works. But we'll have Q&A whenever I kind of can cope with the idea of it. I'll open it up a little bit and we can have people ask any questions that they want to ask about the book primarily, I suppose, but other stuff too, I guess, within reason, and I'll endeavor to answer questions and be informative and friendly and helpful as best as I possibly can. So what's the time then? So it's 8 o'clock. So I'll just let people file in a little bit more. I know that it's often the case that people can crop up a little bit late. So I'll just give people a bit of a chance to join if they're still on the way, and then I'll start talking about the book. So I hope everyone's had a nice day. If you're in America, then I guess it's, well, I suppose it depends, doesn't it? Because America's quite big. So if you're in America, it could be anything from like mid-morning to mid-afternoon, I suppose, roughly. So hope you're having a nice day, and and that this doesn't interfere too much. If you're in the UK, I hope you're having a lovely evening. Of course, we're not. None of us are having a lovely evening in the UK because it's like a dystopian hellscape. And if you're somewhere else, like Australia or somewhere like that, then I guess I have no idea. Roughly middle of the night, really early in the morning. I don't know. Kind of worried about the people who might be joining us from Australia. That's being really committed. Fair play. Fair play to you if you're all the way over there. Okay, we've got 79 people in the room, so that's good. So I suppose I may as well make a start. So yes, welcome to the book launch of my book, which is my first book, and it's this one here. I've actually got a copy this time. I didn't have a copy but ready for the last one because I'd accidentally given it away in a competition and hadn't realized that left me without a copy of my own book, which kind of says it all, really. So yeah, this is the book launch of this book, which came out a couple of months ago now. It's called What I Want to Talk About, in case somehow you don't know, and it's by me, which is this person here and this person here. And again, I would assume you know that because you're here. And it's likely, of course, that most of you will probably already have read it, in which case that's great. And thank you very, very, very much for doing that. If you haven't read it yet, I don't know, maybe you've just been waiting, you've got to get the book launch out of the way before you can open it, before you can make a start, then I will try not to do spoilers, I suppose. Not quite sure what kind of spoilers I could give. I don't die at the end, which is good. I don't think that's much of a spoiler. And it turns out that the protagonist is autistic, which again shouldn't be too much of a spoiler either. But yes, thank you for everyone that's bought a copy. I know that a fair few people have, and it's just surreal, to be honest, to see people talking about it and holding it in their hands and taking photos of it on their coffee table and that kind of thing. It's because it's taken an awful long time. It's incredible, actually, how slow publishing is. It was something I had no experience of, and I don't know, I guess I always just assumed that it was relatively quick. But the biggest the biggest time sink would have been the writing of the book. You know, I always assumed that that was the case, that it would be the writing that would be the biggest issue, you know, the real time taken. But actually, it turns out there's an awful lot of stuff that happens after you've, you know, written the words "the end," that takes months and months and months and months. And I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a moment when I talk about the, you know, the birth, the creation of the book. But it is my first book. You know, this is all new to me. I've never done a book launch before. I've been to a couple, but I've never had one of my own. Obviously, this is my first book, and hopefully it's the first of, well, first of some. I'm not going to go for many because that's too optimistic, I think. But hopefully it's the first of some, and I'll be doing something like this again in March. That's for sure, because I've got my second book coming out. I don't know whether that's going to be like this or whether it might be in person and flashbangy. I don't know. I've got no idea what they have planned for me. But either way, there'll be some kind of launch. And then who knows? Who knows for the future? Maybe there'll be more. In which case, I will probably get quite used to doing this, and it won't be quite so scary and intimidating and terrifying and all those other fun adjectives. So yeah, welcome and thank you. And here we are to talk about what I want to talk about. So I'm going to start by talking about where the book came from. Okay, just its kind of its creation story. It's not creation story, origin story. That's better. A bit religious, creation story. Yeah, the origin story of the book, because it goes back quite a few years now. And I know that time has done a very strange condensy thing where it feels like it's kind of simultaneously 2020, but also 2001 somehow. I don't know whether you all feel that way. I certainly do. I can't kind of cope with how time works as an adult. I've never really got used to it, but it has been a long drawn out process getting this book into the world. And I guess it all really started, you can date it all back, I suppose you could start it in 1983 when a young boy was born in Leicester Royal Infirmary. No, I'll start in 2017 because obviously that was when I got my diagnosis. That was when I was told by a friendly person that I was autistic, believe it or not, and they and that began something for me, something that kind of came out of nowhere. Because up to that point, I'd just been teaching. You know, I was just an English teacher, bumbling along, doing that job as I had been for, you know, a decade or so. But on finding out that I was neurodivergent, I needed to know more about it. I needed to understand exactly what that meant for me, because part of the reason for getting diagnosed was to try and work out why I felt so dreadful all the time. You know, what was going on there? Like, why did I feel so rough and miserable and stressed and anxious and alien and endlessly just bothered by how nothing seemed to fit properly? You know, I mean, a lot of you will know exactly what I'm talking about here. But I had to have an answer to that. And getting a diagnosis was great, but it wasn't a full answer. You know, it was the start of an answer. You know, it was the you know, the title and introduction of an answer, but it wasn't the main paragraphs filled with detail and evidence that a good English teacher needs. So I had to really immerse myself in trying to figure out what this actually meant. And in doing so, you know, it was a really nice feeling because everything made a lot more sense. Everything that had happened to myself in my life that I could remember all of a sudden started to make more sense. And I found myself writing about it a lot. And up to that point, writing was I'd always had a bit of a dream that I wanted to be a writer. Like when I was a kid and when I was at university, I mean, I did English literature. So, you know, I love the idea of joining those people, you know, and having books in libraries and books in bookshops. You know, it was a nice idea, but I hadn't pursued it at all. You know, I didn't have the time. I was very busy, and you know, stressed and feeling alien in a strange world. So, but I started writing, and this was quite new for me, to be kind of, it almost felt a bit like diary-like. Only because of the way that the world works now, it was public, because I was doing it in a blog, and then later I was doing it on Twitter. getting all this information out there. Basically, I was writing about it in order to absorb it and understand it for myself, because that helps. That can be a really nice way to make sense of things. And this was, what would this have been? The Twitter stuff started in kind of late summer 2019, I think. It was very late, in my Twitter experience. I mean, I joined Twitter in, I can't remember what it says on my account now. 2009, would that make sense? 2009 feels early, but I'm sure that probably was when I first started. And I barely used it. If you go, I remember I went all the way back to my very first tweets, and it's just stuff like "I'm hungry" or "Hello world" and all that kind of stuff that people did in the very early days of social media, when we had no idea what a tremendously terrifying beast it would become, and it was kind of cute and fuzzy and fun. I've tweeted a lot about education. I was a teacher. I was part of the Edu Twitter people gang, but a very minor part, kind of ignored, apart from by a few nice people who were very kind. But I started tweeting about autism, August 2019, probably, roughly. And it really started to pick up in a way that I didn't really expect. Certainly didn't really know what to do with it or how to, kind of cope with it. But it happened. And I remember, I had like 2,500 followers, for most of my time on Twitter. That was mostly education Twitter in the UK people. And it just started to climb. And it was climbing and climbing and climbing all the time. Even when I wasn't doing anything, it was going up. And, it's kind of odd to watch that happen. And I was writing and writing and writing and getting it all out there and writing these lengthy threads that I'm sure a lot of you will have read at some point. I've been doing them for a long time. I don't do them as much now. That's the thing. I do them far less these days. I was doing them frequently back then, like one a week, maybe even more. Whenever I had something to say, I'd just splurb it onto Twitter and see what people thought, and see how people were responding and that kind of thing. And it was, people seemed to like it. They seemed to find the threads easy to read and kind of relatable, which is good, because that kind of made me feel like I wasn't alone, that I was explaining my experience of autism and people were kind of going, yeah, that's similar to me. That's kind of how I feel about it. Yeah, I can recognize that. And that felt really nice, because it felt like I'd kind of found people that, I hadn't had for most of my life. So that was really good. But part of this was people started to get in touch with me, as people do when you start to get a bit of an audience. You become kind of, I don't know, hot topic or something. People want to get involved and see what they can do. And I had a few people get in touch from different publishers and stuff like that. And I was, at this point, I can't think more than about a month ahead. So the idea of people coming to me and saying, "Oh, would you like to write a book?" I was kind of flattered, but I didn't feel it was in any way feasible. Like, I didn't think it would be possible to do, especially because I struggle to finish big projects. I really do struggle with that. But there was one publisher came along, and it was JKP, Jessica Kingsley, who obviously have a whole kind of dedicated branch of autism, publishing. And they got in touch, and they just wanted me to write something. It was just like, "Oh, write a book." And I was like, "Okay." And for the first time, I had a meeting with them, with Linda Cooper, and we spoke about, just about everything. And we landed eventually on this idea of writing about my special interests, mostly because it was the only thing that I could think that I would possibly be able to finish. Because by default, if it was my special interest, then there was a good likelihood that I would kind of enjoy writing about them, because that's how it works. So I thought, well, if I do that, then maybe there's an outside chance that I might actually finish the thing, and it might actually be able to get out there and, and do okay. But it was quite a bit later that I landed on the idea of making it biographical as well. I think, I'm not quite sure what I was going to do. I think I was almost going to do a kind of like 7 or 8 chapters just talking about the special interests and nothing else, like 8 mini essays on 8 completely different things. And I'm not quite sure who would have wanted to buy, who'd buy that. But then I landed on the idea of linking it in with my biography a little bit. and autism. That was the key thing. Making it, yeah, they're my special interest, but I wanted to try and say something about being autistic. And really get that information out there, because one thing that I noticed while I was doing all of this is that the level of understanding outside of the autistic kind of world, you've got the autistic bubble of people who are autistic who know a lot about it, who are very well versed and because they've lived it. As soon as you go outside of that, the knowledge is patchy. So everyone's saying they'd buy that book. Everyone's like, yeah, I'd buy it. I'd definitely go. I mean, yeah, fair play. I mean, maybe that's what I'll do one day. Maybe the sequel to this will just be just a list of things that I've enjoyed in my life, things that I really like, in a very just bullet point. No chapters, just an endless bullet point list of things that I like. Anyway, I figured that there was a lot of misunderstanding and so many misses. I talk about miscommunication, misinterpretation, misunderstanding, so much in my life. Yes, series of spreadsheets. Yes, a series of spreadsheets. A lot of misconceptions, a lot of stereotypes that are very, almost fatally wrong about autism. So I wanted to try and do something about that as well. So I thought, well, what I'll do is I'll try and communicate everything that I've learned about autism in the last few years and try and squeeze that in there as well. And I did it, and somehow I wrote the thing. And looking back, I genuinely don't know how that happened, because I was writing this probably the whole time that people have known me, like followed me on Twitter or talked to me online or whatever. I've never been entirely well, like my mental health isn't brilliant. It's not like robust and hearty. It's a bit fragile. It can waver and it can collapse, and all the rest of it. And the period when I was writing this, I had some moments. I had some really, pretty rough times. So the fact that I managed to finish it at all still astonishes me. I mean, I was writing it in short bursts, like really short bursts. And this is where my suspected ADHD really comes out, as far as I'm concerned, because I can't write any longer than maybe 15, 20 minutes at a time. Any longer than that, I just start to fade away, and I need to be doing something else, please. I want to go and do something different now, please. And that's why Twitter was great. That's why Twitter worked for me, because I was writing these threads, like bang, 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 in little short, intense bursts, and then just sitting back and just relaxing. And relaxing, what a nonsense. I wasn't relaxing. I can't relax. I was not writing. So I was writing this book in these short bursts, not even 1,000 words at a time, and writers. I mean, at the time I was talking a lot to writer friends of mine, people like Sarah Gibbs, about the writing process. And sometimes I'd kind of say, yeah, I'm managing 500 words a day at the moment, and she'd be like, yeah, that's brilliant, you'll get a book in the end out of that. And I was like, yeah, I'm not though, am I? I'm trying to tell myself I am, and I'm trying my best, but sometimes I'm writing 10 words and then I delete them. Oh, there she is. Hello. Just name dropping. I'm going to name drop loads of people. Spielberg, the Pope. These are no, I'm being silly. But yeah, I was trying to do a kind of decent chunk of writing a day, but it was difficult, and I was writing it all on my phone. This entire book was written on my phone. I know that people have this kind of weird idea, and if I know that people like Daniel Sohedge loves typewriters, typewriters. There's a kind of romantic ideal that writers are sitting at their typewriter, banging away and ka-ching, bang, 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 ka-ching. Maybe, with a view over the ocean, in like a little shed or something lovely, really nice. I was writing on my phone on a Word document, lying down on the sofa in the living room, with the lights off usually, and the brightness on the phone turned right down because headaches or whatever. So I wrote this entire book with my finger, because I can't do this. I can't type like people do. When people are typing on their phone, they do it with their thumbs and like this. I can't do that. I don't know why, because I'm good at video games. I can, I'm a guitarist. I can, I can do stuff. But for some reason, I never was able to do that. I type with one finger on my phone. I can type with my whole hands on a computer, on a keyboard, but on my phone it's a one finger job. And yeah, the whole of the first book, every single word of it was written like that. I'm sure I'm not the first, but I don't think that's normal. I'm not sure that's entirely normal for a phone to have been for a book to have been written just with one finger like that. It's very slow going. But the second book, the one that's coming out in March, I actually treated myself to a very cheap Chromebook, like a laptop thingy, so that I could work in the attic, in this room, surrounded by my joys. And that was better. I was typing away a bit more, readily then, but I'd still find myself sometimes just kind of lying down on the sofa and still doing it the old way, because that's what I was used to. So yeah. When you're reading this, think how sore my finger was by the end. What a sentence. Please don't take that sentence out of context. Don't get a screen grab of that. That could go very badly wrong. But yeah, just think about that. So it ended up being written. It ended up finished. It ended up, being sent off and me kind of saying, yeah, there you go, you have it now. Ugh, pushing it away from me like an angry toddler pushing away their dinner, and thus began the long process. Sorry, in-joke there just happened. I'm not going to elaborate because that would break the rules of the in-joke, but that nearly broke me. So thank you for that. Sorry. So what was I saying? Yeah, the long drawn-out process of the whole thing that happens, which is I don't know what they do. I really don't. There were times where I would get an email saying, "Can you just check the book? We've just tweaked it. Proofreaders and editors have had a look at it. They haven't really changed much because it's written really well." And I was like, "Oh, okay, thank you, that's nice." With a finger, but and then they go away again for weeks and weeks and weeks, and then eventually get back in touch and say, "Yep, it's nearly done now." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's good." And it took about a year. It must have been a year between me handing in the manuscript and September the 21st or whenever it was when the book finally hit the shelves. Well, not shelves. I'm actually seeing it in a real bookshop, but hit the online shelves. Because there's just so much going on behind the scenes, I think. And I'm going through the same process now with the second book, and who knows what's happening. I think it's doing all right. I've got interest and all the rest of it, with shops and stuff like that. But yeah, there's an awful lot that goes on behind the scenes in publishing that's very arcane and very unusual, and just the stuff that you would never have expected or never really thought about when before you went into writing. I still don't understand any of it. I really must sit down with my agent one day and just tell him, "Look, just tell me what's going on. Tell me what happens. What do these people do and how does it all work?" Because I like to have all that information, and at the moment it all feels very dreamlike and strange, and like I honestly at this point wouldn't be surprised if there were gnomes or fairies involved in some way, because it all feels so mystical and odd. But anyway, there's just an insight into my head there for you. Ultimately though, it was released, it was published into the world, and everyone here presumably got a copy, and read it, and most people liked it, which I'm not going to complain about. The vast majority of people that have left reviews, I mean, I don't read reviews anymore because they make me want to cry. Just the stress of refreshing Amazon and seeing that the number's gone up by one. Like there were 61 reviews, now there's 62. Okay, right, let's don the protective gear and jump in and see what somebody's written. Oh, thank goodness, it's a 4-star. That'll do. I'm happy with that. That's fine. Yeah, you get kind of used to not checking, so I don't know what the deal is at the moment, but people have generally enjoyed it, and I think that's lovely. I'm really glad that it's resonated with people and that people have found it entertaining and informative and all of those other nice words. So yeah, so there we are. That's the book. So I thought I would now do a bit of a reading, which is, now this is redundant if you've got the Audible version, because you already heard me do this for the whole book. So, feel free to go and make a cup of tea, or, play a few levels on Sonic or something if you need to. I'm just going to read a bit of the book for you with my voice and my eyes. So I have chosen very carefully that there is logic to this. Oh, by the way, this is the illustrated copy. The one that I'm doing for the person that won the competition. So this is the computer game level. So I've tried. I feel like my illustration skills have declined a little bit with age. But anyway, so there's the hills from Mario. You remember the hills from Mario? I really wanted to climb those hills in the background. There's Mario here. There's a Pokeball that isn't quite circular, which really irritates me. There's a Sonic. Look at Sonic there. I hadn't drawn Sonic since I was like 12 years old, and then I drew it again for the first time in 30 years or whatever. There's illustrations. I'm going to read the first bit of the book that I wrote. This is the bit of the book that I sent off to JKP to say, will this do? Is this all right? Would you read this? So I'll just read a couple of pages of that, and then we'll talk about the interests in a bit more detail. Okay, so yeah, for those of you that remember, this is the beginning of chapter 3. It's the bit about being in Edinburgh for Christmas in 1993. What a year that was! Honest to God, I got a Mega Drive and Jurassic Park came out the same year. It's never been topped. Let's just say it. Let's just put it like that. I don't want my daughter to ever hear me say that, but that has never been topped. So anyway, right. Set difficulty to hard. It was Christmas 1993. The Steven Spielberg movie Jurassic Park, an adaptation of Michael Crichton's terrifying sci-fi classic, had loomed large in my brain for most of that year, and dinosaurs was still a favourite of mine. But all of that was about to change. You see, I was about to receive my very first games console. Big moment in anyone's life. Video games had been a peripheral interest for years already, but had never been promoted to the Premier League of distractions. This may have been due to the hardware. I had been the owner of a Commodore 64 and a Sinclair ZX Spectrum. Speak of these today, and geeks the world over will reply in hushed, reverent tones about the glory of these systems, their architecture, coding, the fact they were a gateway drug for 1 million software designers. But to me, they were just too complicated. I mean, I was only 10. In all fairness, I was 10. So, the Sinclair, the things that the Sinclair really had going for it was perfect for people in their mid-teens, I think. But as a 10-year-old with no technological experience, I didn't know what to do with it. It was just too much. And the idea of playing a video game on a tape, imagine. Anyway, I had autistic inertia to get over, of course, and the complexity of writing in the code of a game, by no means a universal treat for autistic people, never appealed to me at all. I needed plug and play. This is where Sega stroll in, cocksure and spiffy in their newfound popularity based on the adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. The Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis, if you're that way inclined, was released in 1990 in Europe and sped to prominence over the aging Nintendo Entertainment System, or the NES, poor thing. I had coveted one for years, relying on my weekly visits to my best friend's house on Friday evenings to get my fix of a blue speedy mammal. But now I was about to receive my very own. And I'll tell you what, I still think about those Friday evenings. I'm not in contact with the guy anymore, but yeah, we were inseparable at primary school. And every Friday we'd go around each other's house. That was the tradition. And he had, I think it was his brother actually that had the Mega Drive. And we would sit, and because I had been kind of established as the person who could play the game properly and actually knew what they were doing somehow, we would all just sit there and watch as I tried to get through the game, Sonic 1. And I vividly remember, we'd be like on tenterhooks, like, oh my God, and they'd be jumping up and down while I was fighting the boss on like Spring Yard Zone or something. And it's just crazy, what a world that was, where we didn't know there was a level after Spring Yard Zone. We didn't know that. We didn't know that we'd be plunged into the labyrinth zone because we didn't buy the magazines we didn't have the internet. So it was exciting. We had no idea what was coming next, and we had no idea what we were doing. And yeah, those days were special. They really were. But yeah, those Friday evenings, I treasured them very highly. Anyway, we were spending Christmas in Edinburgh, house sitting for my godmother, who has emailed me to apologise for the for the colour issues on the television, which I felt awful about, because I really didn't want her to feel that she needed to apologise, because that's not what I'm after. But I mean, it's kind of nice. But yeah, it was interesting. This had caused me considerable stress. It was my first Christmas away from home, and despite being familiar with the city, I was finding being in a new environment difficult. My godmother had only recently moved to this flat, and her modernisation work, installing new bathrooms, bedrooms, etc., was very new and smelled strongly of fresh pine and paint. It was a bit of an assault on my senses. Although I've got to say, whenever, you know how smells do that thing where they remind you so strongly of stuff, whenever I hear that kind of new build smell, I am transported right back to this place. We only spent a week there, but it must have made an impact, because I'm always back I remember it vividly in that house whenever I smell sawdust or wood being worked or whatever it might be. On top of this, the only television in the place was broken. The colours were wrong, as if the red tube had burned out, leaving everything odd shades of green. Knowing that I was getting a Mega Drive for Christmas, because at this point I had stopped believing in Santa, I'm afraid. I think that came very early for me. It just seemed too silly. It just wasn't a fan. Knowing I was getting a Mega Drive for Christmas and I'd be playing through this broken television, this was a blow that I tried to absorb as best I could, with mixed success. All of the colours were going to be off. It certainly added to the anxiety surrounding everything. I'm going to end there because you've read this, okay, and you've heard it probably as well, but I'll read a bit more later, okay. But that was they were the first pages of the book that I wrote. I was particularly proud of the cocksure and spiffy. I've no idea where that came from. I mean, I must have been in a very particular mood when I wrote that. Yeah, and JKP were like, yeah, that's nice, that'll do, that's good, let's have a whole book of that. So off I went with my trusty finger to write the whole thing. And here we are now. So it's just after 8:30. So I suppose it's time to talk a little bit about the interests. Now, I'm aware that I don't really want to, I'm not just going to repeat what I've said in the book about these things. There are a few extra bits and bobs about these interests that I just never really got the time to talk about, or the word count. Just I just couldn't talk about them as much as I wanted to, because word counts and word limits exist, and apparently you're not allowed to have books that are 4,000 pages long, especially when you're a new author. I think I've heard tell that if you're particularly successful, then eventually editors stop trying to reduce the length of your books down, and you end up writing 900 pages that really could have been edited down to maybe 400, and then of course eventually you become a transphobe. But that's for people who are very successful, I suppose. Anyways, things then that didn't make it into the book that are to do with my interest. I'm also going to talk about things that didn't make the cut, my special interests that just didn't manage to make it, and they're so angry with me about this. They are so fed up that they didn't get into the book, so I'm going to have to address them, because otherwise it's just harsh. Okay, but things that didn't make it in, the Lego and the architecture stuff that I talked about in the first chapter, I really upset my dad, because I got the name of the composer of the music he used to put on when we'd sit there building with Lego. I got it wrong. He was so upset with that, unreasonably. And I was only 6 or 7, I can't remember. But that's part of the editing process, of course, getting these errors ironed out and getting them right in the end. But yeah, the Lego thing is obviously very important to me. I mean, you can tell, can't you? I mean, I'll just show you a little bit. Let's disconnect and roam. So here's Lego stuff. So here's Lego, and more Lego over there. and there's more Lego there, and there's Lego on the floor, and there's a lot of Lego in the room, in various states of construction and tidiness and mess and all the rest of it. It's just endlessly fascinating to me. I tried to decipher exactly what it was about Lego that I love in the book. I really did try to drill down and figure it out. And I still don't feel entirely satisfied that I have. I really don't. There's something that's eluding me about it. I talked about how I like the destructive element, and I do. I really do. I don't get to do it as much these days because adult shame mostly, but as a kid I would absolutely love to take a New York taxi cab, and smash it against buildings and stuff like in the Avengers films or something, like bang, crash. Because with Lego, of course, you can just rebuild it straight away, and it's just the best thing ever. So there is that, but I don't think that's the only thing. There's something about how it feels in the hand. There's something about how it feels when you clip it together. I think that's really, really quite important, actually. When I think about, my primary stim, because I've kind of squashed my stims down so much that I don't really have many left now. I mean, if I really let myself relax, then they kind of come out. But the one that I've always let myself do is just taking a Lego figure and just taking, this is Iron Man. Say hello, Iron Man. Yes, this is Tony Stark. This isn't Elon Musk. This is Tony Stark, who Elon Musk obviously really, really wishes he was, but he isn't, because Tony Stark is fictional and therefore can't do us any harm. But this is Iron Man, and here I am, just ripping him in half, like Captain America tried to do that time, and Thanos, to be fair. And that feeling, just that, is something to do with the tolerances of the bricks. They're very, very well designed, and they have a kind of they're so strict with themselves about how the bricks have to fit together and how much tension there is between the two bricks at any given point. And you can feel that. You really feel that. You feel the quality. And yeah, I know that I should be getting paid for this. I'd take payment in Lego. I would, but they don't want to. But you can feel the quality, is all I'm trying to say. Okay, so yeah, that is something that I think is a big part of the Lego love for me. The colors as well, especially these days, now that they've expanded beyond, the basic primary colors. I mean, I remember when I got back into Lego as an adult, and I was like, oh my God, purple. Whoa, and orange and pink and different shades of colors as well, like different shades of green. Young people don't know what it was like back in the 80s and the 90s. If you got any green at all, you were lucky. It'd probably be a base plate or a few trees, And now we've got olive green, sand green, bright green, lime green. We've got like the lovely coppery color. I mean, look at this. Look at this. This is the roof of the boutique hotel. I've just ripped it off like a very careful Godzilla. That lovely coppery color that didn't exist in 1991. I can promise you. It's astonishing and it's wonderful. And somebody just mentioned the sorting. Sorting your spare bricks. I mean, you can probably tell that I'm not very good at that because all my bricks are just kind of everywhere. But there's something very special about sorting them by color or by type or something like that, and just putting them all in the little things. And yeah, there's a lot to be said for it. I suppose there isn't one single reason why I like it so much. I suppose there's lots and lots and lots of very different reasons why I like it, and it all converges onto Lego. All these things that I like all converge onto Lego. So yeah, there we are. Other things that I talked about in the book, I talked about in chapter 3, of course, video games. That's never gone away. That's going to be a thing forever. I think I've just got back into doing some fairly focused gaming every evening. I haven't always got time these days, but when I do, the lockdown was the best for me. I played a lot of Subnautica. Anyone played Subnautica? That's a game you shouldn't play if you're scared of water, isn't it? It's, it's like, oh, here you are in a beautiful alien ocean, and look at all the funny animals out there. Go and swim around with them. Go and find resources and build yourself a submarine. And look at all the funny creatures with their colourful faces and the wonderful things. And oh my God, there is a massive whale creature with claws around its face, trying to smash your submarine to pieces. Honest to God, I've never been so afraid of a game. I mean, Resident Evil is scary in its own way. Silent Hill is creepy and all the rest of it. But Subnautica, you feel like you're going to die frequently. And not only that, but you're going to die underground. No, like in underwater caves with lava and sharks and monsters that can teleport and stuff. So yeah, that was a really good game. I really enjoyed that. Stardew Valley, of course, that's a recent game that I've enjoyed. I'll say recent, fairly recent game that I've enjoyed a lot. I replayed Donkey Kong Country 2 Diddy's Kong Quest all the way through recently, completed it, got all the bonuses, got all the special coins and everything, and it was evil. It's the hardest game I've ever played. Can't believe I managed to play it so well when I was little. It's astonishing how good we were with video games when we were kids, and how slow and kind of just sluggish I feel like I've become, with reaction times and stuff. It was a really difficult game to complete, but I did it, so that was quite nice. And recently I've been back on Minecraft. The chapter 6 where I talked about my world, my 10-year-old world. Yes, 10 years and 6 months now that world is. I've been back on there, and I've just been doing cosmetic little touch-ups. I've been just improving things, tweaking. Sometimes I go through periods where I want to do big projects and build stuff, big things like castles and towns and stuff like that. Other times I just want to fiddle with stuff that's already done, just tweak it and make it even better or even nicer or whatever. And I've been really enjoying doing that this last few nights. It's very relaxing, putting a bit of music on and just allowing myself to do that. But it's interesting because the Minecraft chapter, I think, is probably the darkest chapter, even darker than the Titanic one, really, which is weird. When you think about it, because it goes into all the stuff about struggling with parenthood and things like that, and it really does raise questions for me about how difficult parenthood is for autistic people, and just what a challenge it can be. I mean, obviously, we're not all of us. Some people are fine with it and have many children and are very happy, but for so many of us, it's such a challenge. It's such a difficult time. So yeah, it's interesting, that chapter. This idea of Minecraft as a kind of panic room and an escape place. And when I walk through it now, I remember using it as an escape room, and I remember the feelings I had that were why I went into it. Like back 5 years ago, 6 years ago, or whatever it might be. And yeah, it's nice because you can kind of appreciate. Okay, I'm actually feeling better now. That's a nice thing when you've got a lot of issues, when depression never properly goes away, but it's nice sometimes just to be reminded, actually I do feel better now than I did then. And that's often as good as it gets with depression, because it never really totally loosens its claws, but it is nice to think, yeah, I'm in a better spot. I'm in a better spot now. So yeah, that ended up a very dark chapter, whereas some of the other ones, really weren't. I think that the actually, no, I say that, and I think there was quite a lot of darkness throughout. I remember Amanda talking to me about how it was, a very positive book, and very kind of, quite a bit of a boost. Not too much of a downer, compared to some books about the subject, because it kind of naturally gravitates towards stress and unhappiness and things. But I think there is a bit of, certainly for me, looking back, there's quite a few moments of darkness in there. I do want to talk about the music chapter, because that was a really big deal, and that was a difficult one to write because that involved other people. Most of the other ones only involved other people very tangentially, or in the case of chapter 2, my family, who weren't entirely all happy about being compared to dinosaurs. I've tried to mollify them and remind them that it's not meant to be harsh, but yeah, that was an interesting thing. But the chapter 4 was a bit tricky because it involved friends. I'd shared experiences with, you know, that have been very very exciting and very stressful and very big. So I just want to I've got my amp and my guitar. I'm not going to play it. Don't worry. That would be the worst thing. I'm not going to pick it up and start singing. Don't panic, okay? But I'm going to show them to you, okay? Because you know they're important and they're a big part of that whole chapter 4 bit. So this is the guitar. This is the guitar that I use now. It's not actually mine. This is Tom's guitar. You know Tom from the book, my bandmate. This is I think one of the first guitars he had. And before we went to live in Hong Kong, you know, when the band kind of called it a day, he just gave it to me. And being me, I've never really managed to like know what to say to that, you know, because it's so meaningful and it's such a kind of powerful gesture. But yeah, he did, and it's amazing that he's entrusted it to me to look after it, which I have continued to do, and I play it regularly. Still play the old songs on it, but I'm not going to do that now. Okay, but yeah, so this is the guitar that, you know, actually most of the time that he played, you know, certainly in the early days of the band, this was his guitar. You can find videos of me on YouTube in the band. Just search for Sires of Nothing. That was the band, and there are videos. There. Okay, nature punk at its best. So it's in tune. It is in tune, so that's good. And then next to it, which I'm not going to lift up and show you in that way because it's too heavy, is the old amplifier. So just down, you see it. I'm pointing to the amp, just in case you don't know what an amp looks like. That's an amp down there. That's the same amp that I've always had. That's the one that I lugged around to London and Leicester and Oxford and all those places when we were doing the band stuff. So yeah, it still works. It's still very happy. I mean, it's a Marshall, so it ought to, you know. Oh yes, I've got that's the Titanic there. It's not the Titanic, obviously. It's a bit bigger than that in real life and kind of broken, but yeah, that's the Lego Titanic just there. And the Daily Bugle, which is where Spider-Man works when he's not Spider-Man, when of course we have no idea who he really is. That's why Dr. Octopus is swinging from the flagpole, which is good. So there he is. Say hello. No, okay. Yeah, anyway, so there's some relics of the past. And you know, I don't write music anymore. I don't write lyrics at all. Just some things just gone wrong in my brain. I just can't do it anymore. It's very strange because there was a time. This here is my this is the remains of my first lyric book. Okay, so let's just have a look what we've got here. So early October 2003. This dates back to, it's the first pages, and yeah, some of the songs that we ended up playing an awful lot, you know, the songs that we ended up, you know, loving and enjoying playing, they started in word form, at least in this book, along with lots of other things. So yeah, I've tried to keep hold of stuff, you know, bits and bobs and what have you. I'm just trying to find, just in case anyone cares. Yeah, this was one of the songs that you might be able to find on online. Actually, is there a recording? No, I don't think there is a recording of that one online. Here we are, Private Papers. So yeah, here's one song that is on YouTube. So it's called Private Papers. So, you know, there's the lyrics. You can now go, not now, in a bit, and listen to it being played. There you go. That's the whole lifespan of a song there for you. So yeah, that's my special interest. The other ones, Warhammer, unfortunately, is something that I just don't have any of these days. I sold it all years and years ago, all the stuff that I had, but I still yearn for it. I still look at the stuff. I still keep on top of the new releases and all that kind of thing. And one day, if I ever feel like I've got the wherewithal to manage to be able to afford it, to be honest, because I mean, it makes Lego look cheap. I would like to get back into it because there's something very relaxing about the painting element. You know, the gaming I was never very good at. Something about not being able to plan ahead means that playing the game for me is just basically move over there, roll a lot of dice. Oh, they're all dead. Okay, fair enough. I'm just going to go and get a beer then. But the painting I really liked. I loved the, you know, the detail and the calm and the relaxation of, you know, painting these little elves or lizards or whatever. What else? What else? And the Titanic, of course. You know, that's chapter 8, and that's a big deal. Oh, and chapter 7, it's all here, isn't it? It's all here. It's all in this room. All this stuff, apart from Warhammer, which no longer exists in my head. But yeah, the Titanic was. I had to include that. You know, I had to include that because it's just been such a long-term thing. And I felt it was important to try and at least bring in the whole idea of aging in that chapter. I didn't go into it enough. To be fair, there are other people who are much more qualified to talk about autism and aging than I am, because, you know, they really pour everything into it. You know, people like people like John Adams and people like that, you know, who are very well placed to talk about that stuff. But I wanted to mention it because again, it's one of those things that nobody knows about, nobody thinks about, nobody gives a damn, do they, about the fact that we've got an aging autistic population, you know, and what that means for us. I don't know what it's going to be like to get older, you know. I don't know how it works. I don't know what to expect. We know so much about how children present in their autisticness, and it's much harder to know what the deal is with old age. And it does fill me, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this and watching and what have you, probably fills you quite a lot of dread as well. It's going to be an interesting experience to see how that pans out. But anyway, enough doom and gloom for an evening. I want to talk a little before I do another reading, and then a Q&A, hopefully, if people are up for that. I just want to talk about the interests that didn't make the cut. Okay, those ones that got relegated down into the championship of of my special interests, because the biggest one really probably should have been. It really should have been, and to be honest with you, it made a big cameo in chapter 2, and that is the ghosts and folklore and supernatural stuff. Because honestly, you know, sometimes, depending on what mood I'm in, sometimes that overrides everything else, and it's like it's the one thing that I can lose myself in reading about, you know, just for hours, for days at a time. And it did get, you know, I did mention it. I talked about ghost stories, and I talked about why ghosts were scary as opposed to why dinosaurs didn't feel quite so scary in chapter 2. And my dad whisking me off to take a trip to see The Woman in Black. Anyone seen The Woman in Black stage play? Anyone want to do that hand thing where they say, yeah, me, and it scarred me for life? No one? It's horrifyingly frightening. It really is genuinely very psychologically disturbing, because it's done so brilliantly. You know, it's the ghost is in the blooming theatre with you. You know, you're watching the characters like rehearse for the play in a haunted theatre, and you're not really there. You know, the audience isn't meant to be there. You have to pretend that you're kind of not there, because you're just watching them rehearse, and the ghost is knocking about. You know, the ghost is around. Did he? He took you 5 times. Sorry, it's just come out that he took my poor sister, who's younger than me, considerably younger than me, 5 times to see The Woman in Black. So that's good. Thanks, Dad. Good stuff. To be fair to him, it was a great fun, and you know, I mean, I remember it so vividly. But yeah, it was. The ghost is there. She walks down the aisles of the theatre, and you know, I remember at least one time I've seen it. I've been sitting on the edge, and you felt her walk past me, and they put the makeup on the actress, and it's so frightening. It's so terrifying. And then, you know, you see her up in maybe like a box up there, or on the balcony, or, you know, and then eventually she kind of pops up, you know, behind them on the stage, or she's rocking the rocking chair back and forth frantically. Honestly, it's the closest you can get, I think, to an actual supernatural experience if you allow yourself into it, you know, and you know, like remove, you know, suspension of disbelief. And I was like 8 years old, maybe. Must have been about 8 or so. But I think it runs in the family, because in my wisdom, when I was head of English at to secondary school, I thought, well, we're doing the Gothic, so yeah, let's take a trip down to London and go and see The Woman in Black. That's the right thing to do. So I did. I organised a trip. Hated doing that. I'm not very good at organising things, as you've probably gathered. But I organised a trip, and we took the kids down there, and we all queued up outside the theatre. I can't remember what the name of the theatre is now. I should have it in my head. I can't. And as we were lining up, and I think all the kids were having their packed lunch, those that hadn't eaten it on the bus already were eating their packed lunch before the performance. And a window opened in the theatre above us. And these faces peered out, looking at the kids, kind of concerned, kind of worried looking. And I thought, what's going on here? Who are these people and why are they so interested in these year 8 students? And it was the cast. They were in the middle of getting makeup and costumed up and all the rest of it, and they took a look out the window to see what the crowd was like for that performance. And the guy shouted down to us, "Are these a bit young?" And I was like, "Oh God, no!" I mean, they say you become your parents, don't they? There we are. That's proof in my case that I really had it. And I was petrified the whole time. It turned out, to be honest, they weren't really. I mean, year 8 is like, what is that for people who wouldn't know? Like 12, 13 years old. So, I mean, that's doable, to be honest. I only had to spend the entirety of the play looking after a couple of kids who were bawling their eyes out in the bar of the theatre because it was too scary for them. So it wasn't too bad. It wasn't as bad as it could have been. They weren't 8, but yeah, clearly it runs in the family that we are kind of the Wharmby males, a bit like the Simpson males, are destined to do this, to ruin people's lives and to terrify them in some awful way. So yeah, I'm glad I don't have to worry about doing that kind of thing anymore. But anyway, back to ghost stories. So yeah, I mean, I can entertain myself for hours, reading up on things. I've spent a long time doing it just today, but I've got very interesting, very set lines about what I'm interested in, what I'm not interested in, which are really rigid and really clear. And it's like on one side of the line, I am fully invested and fascinated. On the other side of the line, couldn't give a damn, do not care, no interest whatsoever, which is very interesting to me because, for example, I love ghosts. Ghosts, out of all of the supernatural things that people talk about, love it, fascinated, absolutely into it. Okay. Poltergeists, no, not bothered, not interested, do not care, don't want to read about them, don't know why. If any ghost story gets too poltergeisty in its activity, I start to lose a bit of interest. I like them when they appear, I think. Yeah, they are. They're just drama queens. I don't know. There's something about poltergeists that they feel almost too real, which I know sounds really ridiculous. And also, I remember as a kid thinking, how the hell would you cope with that? How would you cope with a poltergeist? I mean, I can't cope anyway. How would you cope if there was literally something in your house going out of its way to throw things around and nick your keys and make murderous remarks on the wallpaper and all that kind of thing? I just couldn't cope with that. Whereas a figure, a ghostly figure, gliding through a forest or on the parapet of a castle, that's the good stuff. There's something romantic about that. And just kind of creepy in a really nice way, rather than noises and bashing and here's bricks being flung at your face. I just don't like that. It's too aggressive. It's too nasty. Similarly, sea monsters, love it. Want to read about sea monsters all the live long day. I want to know about those things. Loch Ness monster, well, not technically a sea monster, I know. The Kraken, even Cthulhu to an extent. I'm into that. I like the ocean, Subnautica, Titanic, etc. Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yeti, literally zero interest, just could not care less. I could walk past Sasquatch and just not care. I would just be like, hi, and walk on, because I've just got no interest in it. And again, I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe it's the similarity. I just kind of, I understand him just too well. Living in a forest, big feet, very hairy, wanting to be left alone. I can kind of get that. So I don't find it very interesting. And my interest in UFOs and aliens and stuff, that really does just fluctuate. Sometimes I'm into it, sometimes I just can't get the interest at all. But ghosts and fairies and goblins, and especially British folklore, we've got such weird things going on in British folklore. From the black shuck, the dog's the bar guest, that kind of creature, to the Tommy knockers down in the Cornish tin mines, and the red caps up in the marches up near the border of Scotland, the Selkies, yeah, there's so many of them, and the thing that I love about them is there's no detail, there's no information, they're just names and rough outlines and legends, and for me that makes it feel more real. It's like, yeah, that's how it would be, isn't it? If these things existed, we'd know of them, but we wouldn't know anything about them. They'd be very mysterious. And there's just something incredibly romantic to me about how humanity creates this stuff, presumably. I kind of hope that it is us creating it and they're not really out there. In order to make sense of the world, or in order to warn the children. I love the idea, if you'll let me go into it now a little bit, I love the concept of what they call the nursery bogies. You ever heard of that phrase? Nursery bogies are those creatures that are told to children by their parents or by their carer, people who look after them, to avoid them doing silly things. Like all the water spirits, don't go down to the river or Jenny Greenteeth will get you. I just love that stuff, because it's so baseless but evocative. The idea that there's a creature down there, that will just, with his long fingers, like the Watcher in the water, in Lord of the Rings, just get you, if you don't behave. And the thing that's always stuck in my mind was reading about this very particular one called Tom Dockin. Tom Dockin, who apparently is a type of goblin sort of creature who has metal teeth, like Jaws, from the Bond films, who lives under the stairs or something, and will come out if a child is naughty. I just love it. It's so beautiful an idea, horrifying, terrifying, and creepy, but not very believable. So you can kind of disconnect from it a little bit, not be too scared. But I can't explain it. It's just so evocative for me of like moonlit nights and lonely moorlands and forests and old ancient cottages and all that kind of stuff, which just speaks to me, for some reason. I just love it. So, if I had my time again, I probably would have either shoehorned another chapter in, had a 9-chapter book and just, said, no, JKP, I'm having 30 more pages. I don't care what you say. This is happening. I need 30 more pages, and just hope that they went with it. Or I could, I suppose, have removed a chapter and replaced it. But I'm not sure what I would have removed, to be honest. That would have been very difficult to decide. So yeah, that's the stuff. That's one of the things that didn't make the cut. Other things that could have made it. I was very tempted to put London in there, but I felt like it might be a bit too alienating for whatever reason, because obviously, it's geographical, and I knew this book was going to be, available all over the world. So, but London has been one of my special interests for decades. I like the idea of the changing geography of places. The way that things alter, the way that things change over time, and how if you just dig down a little, you can find the remnants of what used to be. I've always found that fascinating, and somewhere like London is just obviously the best for that kind of thing, because it's always changing, it's always being thrown up and remodeled and remolded, and yeah, it's my dissertation for my master's degree was all about ghosts in London, which makes sense when you think about it, really, I suppose. So yeah, that would have been possibly one. I think. And other than that, Thomas the Tank Engine, trains generally, I suppose, but I didn't want to be too stereotypical. And if I'm completely honest, the Thomas the Tank Engine fandom is terrifying. It is absolutely terrifying. Some lovely people, but my God, they get cross with each other. They really do, about things, So I didn't want to dip my toe into that too much, because I don't feel like I'm not well attuned to the new stuff. You know, I remember Ringo Starr, you know, back in the day. That was literally my introduction to the Beatles, was Ringo Starr talking about trains on an island, which I suppose it could be a lot worse, couldn't it? You know, but yeah, I remember, you know, those first couple of seasons with the models, you know, before it went CGI. I can talk about them till the cows come home, the music and the model making and all the rest of it. But I can't get involved with the newer stuff and so much controversy, you know, around so many things. And I've heard that, yeah, they have got like a new autistic train, and I haven't had a chance to see how it works yet. I'm always worried, if I'm honest. Whenever autism and the media come up and collide, I'm always nervous because, oh God, you know, what's it going to be now? Is this going to be horrifying, or is it actually going to be quite nice? You know, is it going to be music with Sia, or is it going to be Pablo, you know, on CBeebies? That seems to be, it's either one or the other. You know, it's either really, really nice and gentle and close knit and, you know, really gets autism, or it's just totally bizarre and like someone's fever dream about what autism might be on a different planet with different, you know, there doesn't appear to be an in between, sadly. So yeah, I've been a bit resistant and hesitant to go there, but there we go. So yeah, so I had lots of other things that I could have brought up, lots of things that I could have, you know, really talked about, but I didn't in the end. I chose what I chose, and I'm happy with what I chose, apart from not demanding a ninth chapter about ghosts, which I really should have done. Should have put my foot down and said, this book is not going to press until it's got a whole page dedicated to Tom Dawkins' big metal teeth. But, you know, as a new writer, I'm too nervous. You know, I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to rock the boat and fall in with Jenny Greenteeth. You know, I've got to be careful, you know. So yeah, it is what it is. Maybe one day, maybe what I'll do, actually, I could just do a blog post, couldn't I? I can write a chapter. It's not like I'm not allowed to write a chapter and then just put it out there for people to read. You know, I could just do that, couldn't I? No one's going to stop me. No one's going to, you know, the men aren't going to come and say, no, you must not do this. Yeah, I'll think about trying to get that done when I've got a few spoons available for a bit of writing. And then I'll distribute it widely and freely, and you can all have a look and enjoy it if you want to. Okay, I'm going to read a little bit more from the book now, if that's okay. Just a very short one, because, you know, you've already read it. So I was going to do a bit of chapter 4, the music chapter, just because this is still something that I feel very strongly about, which is the whole idea of having favorites of things and having a music taste. Because even now, I mean, you know, a few years after writing the book, I still feel very insecure in the idea of actually having a taste in music. You know, I still don't really know what it means, you know. So I'm just going to read a little bit, and then we'll have a bit of time for Q&A. If people want to ask Qs, then I will attempt to A. And then I'm going to go downstairs and watch Seinfeld for a bit, because that's my new thing. I like to watch George and think about how, if I were in the situation he finds himself in, that is exactly how I would respond. So that's what I'm going to be doing at about 9:30. Anyway, so come together. I do not know what my taste in music is. For a very long time, I knew what I wanted it to be, as I was aware, especially in my late teens and 20s, of what music was deemed worthy, cool, or acceptable. And for most of my adult life, I have mistaken this knowledge with taste. Now I approach 40, though, I am beginning to realize that this understanding of the fashions of music is not a very good replacement for being aware, comfortable, and confident in your own favorite tunes. I have asked many other autistic people about this, and about the sister issue of what's your favorite film or television show, and the responses are often very similar. A real lack of confidence in explaining our likes and dislikes, and a complete inability to identify a small number of things we can happily state are somehow better and more important to us than any others. As time ticks on, I am increasingly of the opinion that having favorites of anything is a distinctly neurotypical position to hold. It's a bit controversial, that, isn't it? I said that, but I am aware this angle may veer into the controversial. Good to know. I'm on the same page as this guy. As far as I'm concerned, some music is good in that I enjoy the feeling of listening to it, and other music is bad in that listening to it is either boring or stimulates no emotion whatsoever. I suppose that some music could be identified as having a bigger emotional impact than others, or that some might sustain how pleasing they are to my ear for longer. But beyond that, an ability to pick a favourite is beyond me. But that is fine as far as I am concerned. For me, music is a way to moderate my mood and energy levels. In certain ways, it acts like a non-intrusive and fairly harmless medication, and fulfills very much the same role as physical stimming in regulating my stress levels, so long as I remember to listen to some when in the throes of pre-meltdown. This is how I entered the world of music, listening to my old cassette tape of Now That's What I Call Music 10, back in 1992 or so, letting the chilled out guitar and electronics of Crockett's Theme by Jan Hammer soothe me better than anything else I had ever found to that point, although I still do listen to it. Even the video games I've been playing on my Sinclair Spectrum. Flashback to the previous chapter, it's all there. But because I only really used it as a way of relaxing, I had no insight into the fashionable side of music, no desire or drive to seek music out or actively pursue it in any way. Like so many things, being autistic seemed to mean that a sense of terrible inertia spread into everything, even areas where you might reasonably expect me to be more active. It is too easy to get sucked in by the comfort of the familiar. And as such, my taste in music was entirely, and boy do I mean entirely, led by my parents' obsession with 1980s electro and new romantic stuff. Before my birth completely messed up their ability to go out and have big nights out, they had been real music obsessives, and clearly this rubbed off on me, only in this peculiarly passive way. And yeah, I'm going to stop there because, you know, Q&A and everything. I do mean that about my parents. I mean, I never really get the chance to really talk to them in great depth about this. I must try to remember to do that at Christmas this year. But yeah, you know, from the evidence that I can gather together, they really were proper, you know, music people, you know, back in those days, and photographs of them dressed up in the, you know, new romantic kind of outfits from the early 80s, like Ultravox, Animant, that kind of get up. Yeah, quite interesting stuff. But yeah, I suppose I put the kibosh on that quite considerably, being a very grumpy baby. Anyway, there we go. That's my second reading. Now, we've got a bit of time, so I do want to do a bit of a Q&A. If anyone's got any questions that they want to ask. I think I have the capacity, although I've got no idea actually how to do it, to make people's videos come on when they want to ask a question. Having said that, I don't actually know how to, so I might not be able to do that. But if anyone has a question, I guess what you can do is ask it on the chat or put your hand up, and maybe myself or maybe Mel or Laura will be able to get your face up on the screen, and you can ask a question with your big face there and your voice, and then I can answer it. It'd be like a conversation. It'd be nice. It'd be like a human thing, which would be good. So is there any chance that we can have that if people want to ask questions?
I think so. I think I can make them a panelist temporarily if they want to speak.
And then it would just be a case of first come, first serve, I suppose. So you can fight amongst yourselves, you know, like a massive crush of people. I want to ask a question about Lego. So yeah, if anyone's got a question, then do whatever, you know, ask, or, you know, Q&A, or put your hand up or say, I want to ask one, and then hopefully we can get your face on the screen.
We do have a couple of questions already in the Q&A box.
Oh, okay. Well, let's have a look at those then, I suppose. Let's have a look. Oh, here's one. Yeah, from Helen Hurricks. If you hadn't been able to access a formal diagnosis, would you have researched and self-identified anyway? Asking because I'm one of the many people who have been existing in the wrong postcode. Yeah, indeed. I guess I would have done. Yeah, I mean, I was inordinately lucky in that. First of all, my GP took me seriously. It helps, obviously, being a man in this with regard to this. And you know, because the stereotype is still so strong, especially in parts of the medical community, that, you know, autistic people have to be more or less male always. So I got really lucky, and I was diagnosed within like 6 months, which is absolutely unheard of now. Looking back, I don't even know how that happened. I mean, I've got to be grateful for that. But if it hadn't happened, yeah, I would have had to have self-diagnosed. I would have had to have done. I mean, and obviously rightly, because I am. Yeah, I would have done, and I would have been very upset with the people that say that you can't do that. It's like it's treading on toes and all the rest of it, because well, what else are you meant to do? If you can't get the diagnosis, you literally can't even get in front of a doctor, to do that final check, and to give you the bit of paper. It doesn't stop you from being autistic. It doesn't stop your brain being the way it is. So yeah, I find arguments against self-diagnosis to be so damaging and so short-sighted and kind of compassionless that I can actually get quite frustrated and quite cross when they pop up. But yeah. So I think I would have done. Yeah. What else have we got in the Q&A box? So, when hold on. When writing the book, did you block out chapters first or just jump in at the beginning? No, I did them kind of randomly. I did chapter 3 first, then I think I did chapter 2, then I did chapter 1. So I was kind of working backwards at that point. Then I did chapter 4. Then I think I did 6, 7, 5, 8. So yeah, not in any real order. Just it was more, what can I face writing about tonight? With my finger. What can I cope with? Can I really face talking about Marvel heroes tonight? No, not really. I'm not in the right frame of mind for that. I want to talk about people on a ship. So yeah, there wasn't a huge amount of rhyme and reason in it, I'm afraid. Right, what else was there? There were a few other questions. I've always wondered, does the acronym for Size of Nothing deliberately spell out sun? And the answer to that is, I don't know whether it was deliberate or not. It's a good question because, of course, sire, sun, the name was suggested by a good friend of ours, who's the bassist at the time. Was it Andy that came up with the name of the band? No, it wasn't. It was Jason Little, the lead singer of Grandaddy. That's whose fault it was. Grandaddy, the band from the 2000s. He signed, I think, my friend Andy's album with Jason, Sire of Nothing. And we just flagrantly nicked it. We just stole it. So probably, maybe that was him being clever. We just nicked it because we thought it sounded really good. And since then, at least 2 of us have had kids, so we've kind of proven that the band name was a lie anyway. So yeah. So there we go. What else is there in the thing? Just going back because there was some. Oh God, there's loads now. Help. How can you support your autistic child to understand that their friend's lack of interest in their special interest isn't personal? I wish I had an answer for that, because we all know that feeling, don't we? There's nothing worse. There's nothing worse than feeling like you're boring them, or they're not interested. And because our special interests feel very fundamentally personal to us, so deeply important to us. I mean, I mentioned in the book when my mum upset me when she inadvertently insulted my Thunderbirds comics, and I was bereft for a long time. It's hard to give an answer to that. I mean, all I would say is like, be honest about it. Don't simplify it down too much. Refer to them as deep interests, special interests, and just explain it as clearly as you can. I mean, autistic people, we do tend to value clarity. Autistic children often value being treated more maturely. So just be open and honest about it. Just say, special interests are special to you. They are something that you are really into and you love them so much. But other people have different ones, and they've got things that they're really interested in too. And sometimes it's hard to match them up. Sometimes it's hard for the Lego bricks to be clipped together because they're going in different directions. I don't know. All I can say is good luck, because that is a difficult one. It really is. And some of it, I suppose, is just kind of learnt just through experiencing it, and living it. But anyway, let's have a look then. What else have we got? Questions. As a fellow autistic teacher, I'm interested in acts of self-compassion. How, if you did you avoid autistic burnout? Any self-care hacks you can share, please? Full disclosure, I did not avoid autistic burnout as a teacher. So I'm not brilliantly placed. I did have things that I did. I was very fair to myself when it came to spending time alone. So if you are the kind of person that likes to be alone, you need that kind of downtime, then I would recommend having that unashamedly. I did not socialize at break and lunch. I did not, go down to the staff room. I did not feel the pressure to do that, especially after my diagnosis. I really did treat my personal time as sacrosanct. I would toddle down to the canteen to get my lunch. I always loved a hot lunch. And then I would toddle back up to my classroom and I would be in there for the duration. I didn't feel the need. I think it upset people. I think it does, doesn't it? Colleagues don't want to feel like you're blanking them, but I had to. It was something that I had to do. Yeah, like I say, I'm not the best poster boy for that because I did not succeed. But one thing I would say is definitely do not feel shame if you need to be alone, and to give yourself that time. And don't feel pressured to feel bad about asking for those adjustments as well. One of the best ones that I asked for was for everything to be in writing, because I know as a teacher, so much is just off the cuff conversations in the corridor with senior team. They'll just grab you as you're dashing quickly to the toilet, like dashing in between lessons, during your free period when there's no one around, so you can run to the toilet, pressing up against the wall, and then out comes one of the deputy heads and they grab you and it's like, right, we need you to do, and it would never be in writing, it would always be verbal, and it's gone. It's gone before I've even got to the end of the corridor. So be firm. Say I need these things. I need things put into writing. I need to be allowed to have empty quiet time at lunch or whatever. Yeah, it's a tough one, and like I say, I didn't succeed brilliantly, but hopefully they might help. More cues are coming. I'd like to ask if you had any negative feedback from disclosing your diagnosis as a parent. I haven't yet, just disbelief. Yes, we all get disbelief, don't we? So yeah, negative feedback as a parent. No, not so much. Not yet, anyway. I haven't had anything really negative. Yeah, just disbelief. And I never got any negative feedback from parents when I was a teacher either, because I was openly, I talked to the kids about it all the time, and they quite liked it. Those parents liked it. But no, not as a parent. I think it's possible that it could happen, that you could end up with like healthcare professionals maybe being a little bit insensitive or a bit cruel or a bit unpleasant, or social workers. That was a big fear actually for us when we were new parents, because we knew we were a little bit odd, a bit different. I mean, I hadn't got a diagnosis at this point, but still a bit strange, if you like. And yeah, I was worried that our disorganization and things like that could cause like massive problems, and you live in fear of the worst happening, of people thinking you're not suitable to be a parent and all that kind of thing. And I think that happens to a lot of autistic parents. Even if they don't end up having that issue, they fear it, because we all know how people treat difference, don't we? They treat it with fear and distrust, and they are things you do not want the state aiming at you as a new parent. Fear and distrust, that's terrifying. The idea of them, that episode of The Simpsons when poor old Marge, they take Homer and Lisa away. Homer and Lisa, she'd be happy if they took home. They take Bart, Lisa, and Maggie away, don't they? And they put them next door with the Flanders. And the performance of Julie Kavner for Marge in that episode, that horror and terror of you can't do this, you can't take our children away, is something that I think autistic parents feel, because we'd be powerless. We'd be powerless in that situation, just for being a bit quirky, a bit different, and and maybe struggling a little bit. I often think all it would take would be a meltdown at the school gates. That's all it would take for people to start wondering, like they do, you know, and asking questions, you know, and that's a scary thought. That is, the more I think about it, the more I think we need more books on autistic parenthood, because it's a terrifying thing and we often go through it completely alone. Anyway, let's have a look. More questions are coming in more thick and more fast than I can actually handle them. Did you feel that reading or English literature was a special interest or passion, or does it feel like that looking back on it? It felt like that for me. I feel that literature helped me understand human behavior. What did it feel like for you? Yeah, I think it was a special interest. Weirdly, it's not anymore, which is awful. Really is. You got a degree in something, and it's one of those special interests that's just evaporated, like they do sometimes. I don't read a lot of fiction anymore at all, and I feel really bad for saying that. I feel like my my lecturers are going to swoop in through the window and take my things away from me. I don't know what it is. I just don't. And yeah, I think it's interesting if you do a degree in a thing, because it's a, oh yes, I write non-fiction, Neil. This is Neil, by the way. He's the man that wakes up very early and makes me bacon when I stay at his house, which I haven't done for ages because of blooming COVID, and I really want to see his train set and his rabbits. I want to see his rabbits on the train set. That's what I want to see. Anyway, yeah, I don't know what it is. I know that a good friend of mine, and a good friend of Neil's, he's a professor of English literature now. He went the whole way, and he's got it. That's his thing. That's his life. And I know that Neil still reads a lot, and I know that a lot of the people I went to university with still have that love of reading. They still read all the time, and I feel like a fraud because I just don't so much anymore. It's ever so strange, but yeah, it was a special interest. It was a very big special interest for a very long time, but it just kind of petered out. Yeah, it's just not there anymore so much. So I tend to read nonfiction now. I'm just diving into a massive Beatles biography that I've had recommended to me. So that's going to be fun. And yeah, books about autism and neurodiversity and ghosts. Obviously, loads of books about ghosts and the Titanic, but just not so much fiction. Anyway, I'm going to answer one more question because time is tight and my voice is starting to give, and I'm tired and I want another cup of coffee that's actually warm rather than cold and horrid. I'll tell you what, I'll answer some really quick fire. So, Stephen, I have not been to Belfast. No. If I ever get to go, then it will be the first place I go to. I'll just be straight there like a shot, the Titanic Museum, because yeah, I not so much the museum. I need to see the gantries. I need to see Harland and Wolff. The dry dock. I really need to see that. Other things. You mentioned ADHD too. How do you find the ADHD autistic worldviews co-inhabiting? I feel like I've talked about this a lot recently, actually, because I don't know why. It's just, when I went to London to do this kind of interview for a film documentary thing, that was primarily focused on ADHD and autism and how they exist in a person. And yeah, it feels I've got to be straight up with you. I haven't got an ADHD diagnosis. I am self-diagnosed ADHD because I'm waiting. I'm still waiting, and it's been 2 years now, I think, and nothing. But I'm confident, I guess, because I know a bit about it. I'm fairly sure that I am. And for me, it feels like they're always in conflict, except when they're not. They're either in horrible conflict, bickering like Bart and Lisa Simpson, or they're completely complementary to each other, and they're just working in sync, and it just works out brilliantly. And it just depends on the day. It's like this dance, or like two random things. If you imagine like those DVD screens, where it bounces across like this, and every now and again hits the corner, and everyone goes woo. If you imagine like two of those just kind of dancing around each other, and every now and again they connect, and it works, and it's brilliant, and it just everything feels better. And then they disconnect again and float around differently and cause difficulties and stress and all that kind of thing. So it's an interesting experience. Yeah, I do want to talk more about that, I think. Yeah, well, if I'm in Belfast, Stephen, you'll be I'll be banging on. Oh no, I won't bang on your door. That'd be awfully rude. Imagine doing that, just going to someone's house, banging on the door and demanding that I get shown around the Titanic Museum. What a dreadful thing to do. But I will send you a tweet and say hello. And maybe then, yes, we can we can have a look around. Anyway, so I'm about to go, but was there anything else? Did you find writing the book difficult at times, having to remember back on things that happened? No, it's all there. I never had to stretch my memory at all. It was all still there, very, very vividly. Yeah, I didn't really have any problem with that whatsoever, I'm afraid. Anyway, I'm going to call it a day because my voice is going and I'm tired and I want to go and watch telly and relax and everything. So thank you very, very, very much for listening to me rabbiting on for all this time. It's been really lovely. Sorry that we didn't have more interaction. I'd like to do this in person, if I'm honest with you. That would be my favorite thing to do in the world. So maybe when the second book comes out, maybe I'll be able to do it like in a real place. Yeah, in Belfast. A demand to do it in Belfast. HarperCollins, come on, sort it out. They'll probably expect London, and I can't really say no to that because I love London, but we'll see what happens. Cheers, everyone. It's been really nice to just chat about this stuff, and I hope it's been interesting and vaguely enjoyable and stuff. So yes, thank you very much. The book is still available. If you haven't got a copy yet, go and buy one. Buy them for your friends and family for Christmas. Buy so many. Buy everyone you know a copy. They'll all want it. Of course they will. Why wouldn't they? Yeah, I'm very, very glad that it's relatable and people are enjoying it and people are getting insight from it and all the rest of it. And thank you very much for joining me tonight and all the rest. So thank you, and I'm going to go now. So thank you and bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody. I'm not going to go. I'm just going to stay around and see what people say, because otherwise it feels rude. I can't just hang up. I can't just slam the phone down and not read any of the feedback. So I'm just going to sit here quietly now, just read if anyone says anything.